see if it's going live. All right.
I mean, I read them at the time. There's just so many messages between us.
No problem. Don't worry. I'm going to add a comment right now. These are see if it's going live.
Oh, I see him. I see him now. Question 1, question 2, question 3. Though April 30th. There's just so many messages between us.
No problem. No problem. Don't worry. Hold on. Sorry, turning this. I just put them in the comment section as well. Okay, so I do apologize. We are going live right now, just getting through some of the initial technical difficulties. I just posted in the comment section Val's responses.
Okay, good.
And this Marcus will be responding on his own as well as responding to what Val has posted. So today's segment is focusing on the role of the government in the United States and their misinformation and their representation and misinformation and disinformation and ability to communicate through this crisis. We will be focusing on the local, state, and federal responses. To begin off, the questions that we'll start off the segment with are: how have government officials responded to COVID-19, specifically when it comes to keeping the public informed or lack thereof? What have they done poorly so far? What have they done well? And how can they do better in the future? So, Marcus, feel free to take it away in your opinion.
Right. I'm going to just reiterate, kind of do these a sentence or two at a time because there's a lot here. And I'm just going to quickly read what she said because I think it's just relevant for people to follow along.
Sure. So, go ahead.
Her first point, it's just a question. I think it is fair to say that President Trump was handed a manure sandwich in the sense that no outcome on either side of the spectrum was going to be a positive one. The trade-off is human lives or the lives affected by the economic impact of 22 million people or more facing the challenge of unemployment. What was positive about his response? 19 briefings, the formation of the task force was a positive in theory, but not so much in practice. Right, I'm going to stop there and pause for a second. So not to start off by being argumentative, but it's a debate. So I guess
that's the goal.
A debate is a civil way of having an argument, I guess, without getting upset about it. I don't really agree that it was a no-win scenario for the leader of our nation or any nation. I'm going to take a minute or two because I think this is really important. We were one of the last nations to actually start seeing cases. Before we saw or at least were aware of a single case, we'd already seen the experiences of Italy and France and other nations that had been going through this, and obviously, let alone in Yuan, that we'd seen what happens, we'd seen how it spreads, we'd seen what they had to do to mitigate it. The WHO had a test that they were using that was working. So we had the advantage of knowing what was coming. And even though we weren't informed about it, the intelligence community was warning the administration as early as late January of how serious this was. So they knew it was coming well before even the American public really knew. We also had the advantage of being a very wealthy nation with a lot of power and a lot of economic success. If you compare our response to that of some other nations, I'm going to use South Korea, which is a great example, but it's not the only one. It just so happens the very first case that South Korea had was the same day as the very first case we had. South Korea has 1/6 of our population, so it's a smaller nation, but it's got over 50 million people. At this time, when 100,000 Americans are going to be dead by next week, 300 people are dead from COVID in South Korea. 300. At a time when we have, God knows, 30 million people have lost their jobs, far fewer have lost their jobs in South Korea. At a time when we're struggling to to reopen businesses, and it's very, very compromised. They are much further along than us in reopening businesses. People are eating in restaurants very carefully. People are working. There's much, much robust. And you could see a similar story in New Zealand. You could see similar stories in Taiwan. You could see similar stories in Germany, Norway, Denmark, a lot of places. So what did they do different than us? They were serious about it from the start. They implemented aggressive testing, contact tracing. They sent a clear message to their people. Everyone should wear a mask when you're out in public. Wash your hands. They used South Korea used computer, iPhone and whatever the other kind technology to continuously remind people of what they should do, what they should not do, and also when somebody was infected to make sure that they observe the quarantine. So there was a way to do this where we would have had much more economic success. We would have had much fewer people dying. I'm not saying we would have only had 300. There may be more Americans with comorbidities and so forth, but we could have had much fewer people dying. And by the way, had Mr. Trump done all of that, he'd be a shoo-in to be reelected. He would be he'd have a 70% approval rating today. Some of us would never approve of him. I'm one of them. There's so many other things about him, but had he handled this well, these other leaders, they have 70 to 75% approval ratings in their country. So I just categorically disagree with the idea that it was a no-win scenario and that he was kind of a victim of circumstances. So I'm just going to lay that out there right there.
But I just want to bring the attention and the focus, though, Marcus, and that you can disagree with his policies, but make sure to focus on the communication response.
I will, but they're not separate. But since Val said it was a no-win scenario, just the broader context, I don't agree that it was a no-win scenario at all. Now, the communication is a big part of this because, right, so he formed up the task force, he had all of these briefings. One of the key things that I was just talking about that needed to happen was a consistent message to the American people. This is a very serious thing. If we want to save lives, protect our health, and be able to get back to economic growth and minimize economic damage as quickly as possible, this is what we need to do. Practice social distancing. Everyone should wear a mask in public. And you know what? It could have been presented as this is a patriotic thing. I'm asking every American to do it because it's good for all of us. And we would have been done so much better as a country rather than, well, they say we should wear a mask, but I'm not going to wear one. And now you have people who are big Trump supporters walking around yelling at people. Val, I believe, has experienced this personally, and I know people have experienced it, yelling at people why they're wearing a mask. There have been people who've gone into a store that said, you have to wear a mask to come into this store. They have physically harmed people who work there. In fact, a few of them have been killed. People who work in stores have been killed, literally killed, because they told people they need to wear a mask. They came back with a gun. There's at least 2 examples I'm aware of like this. So the communication has not only been inadequate, it's been horrendous. It's been dividing us. It's been a completely inconsistent message. And it's gone from, at the end of March, well, this is a very serious thing, and we really need to practice, to a week later, well, we can't keep the economy shut forever, and we got to reopen. And when there were demonstrators in the various states posting tweets like liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, implying that these governors were tyrannical because they were trying to protect the health of their people. So,
is there any positive you can note, or do you feel there's all been a negative response?
Is there anything positive?
Federal level.
No, I mean the fact that Anthony Fauci is a good man and he goes up there and he gives accurate information to the American people is a positive, but he's been largely marginalized. Most Trump supporters now are going around saying he should be fired because he's the one who's keeping the economy closed. Trump undermines him at every step of the way. So to me, he's there to provide cover. So people who want to believe that Trump is taken seriously say, well, he's got Fauci there and he's serious and he seems to listen to him sometimes. He listens to him not at all. He does what he wants to do, and what he wants to do is focus on getting the economy revved up so that he can get reelected. What he wants to do is convince people that everything's going to be great so that they will believe it up until we get to November 3rd. At the end of the day, I'm sorry if I'm totally negative, but
No, I mean, and I'm not pushing back because
no, I'm just telling you.
here,
Uh,
but
I know this man's character. We in New York have known him for many years. I'm very aware of everything he's done in his life. He is 100% a con man. And what a con man does is he is really good at convincing you that his con is what's good for you. You're going to get wealthy. You're going to have all kinds of success, this, that, and the other thing. This is how he got people to spend $35,000 on Trump University. It took years for them to realize they'd been conned and to successfully settle a lawsuit with him. This is how he got people to invest in casinos in Atlantic City, where he structured the deal so he made money no matter how much everybody else lost, and people lost money left and right. There are endless examples of it. And what he's doing now, what he's been doing since he's president, this is the ultimate expression of it, is he's trying to bullshit his way through until he gets what he wants, which is to get reelected. And after that, if the con becomes uncovered, if everyone realizes, you know what, we don't have a cure, it's not getting better. Other countries have done 100 times better than us because they took it seriously, and we're all screwed up. It'll be too late. He won. He can do whatever the hell he wants, and we're gonna all be in terrible shape. So no, I think it's almost like saying if somebody did something well, it's almost like saying if I was the project manager of a project, that's what I do for a living. The thing was a complete failure. It wound up in a lawsuit. The client was completely unhappy. It was a complete failure. All the people who worked on the team with me were really unhappy. And somebody said, you know what, though? Those status reports Marcus sent out every day, he was really good at Word, and they kind of had a nice format. It's like, yeah, that might be true. You found one tiny little positive among a sea of negative. Does it mean anything? No. Yeah, you wrote a nice status report. The whole thing was a complete failure. That wouldn't keep me in my job, I guarantee you. So no, I'm not going to pretend that something positive just to try to be objective. I'll leave that up to the geniuses in our journalism world who think they're required to find some balance in everything they report. Another one of my pet peeves.
well,
Okay.
that was more of our media focus, but we can bring that back another debate.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't play that game.
Yeah.
If somebody's doing a terrible job, then I'm going to say they did a terrible job. I'll explain why, and I'm not going to pretend there's some redeeming features to it when there aren't. If there were, I'd say so. I mean, if you ask me, is there anything he's done good as president, I would struggle to find something. I could find something for other presidents who I disagreed with. You name any Republican president before, and I'll be able to name some positive things about their presidency.
So, but I think we know your opinion on President Trump's response on this. So instead, let's move on. Unless you want to keep responding to what Val has written, we can instead move on to the more direct question and answer section, where I wanted you to know how Vice President Biden should be responding, and should Biden be addressing this.
Before we move off our comments, I just want to, at the end, I just want to say I completely agree with her when she says it's troubling when disinformation affects public health. And for example, the promotion of hydrochloroquine as a panacea for the treatment of COVID-19 being one of the most egregious examples. So I don't want to sound like I'm disagreeable. I completely agree with that. That's one of the worst parts about this. Misinformation when it relates to public health coming from the government or anybody is unacceptable. And that's been a big problem.
And just to reiterate, Marcus is reading from Val Parks's responses, and I have them posted, and I will also post them up in a clear version on the blog itself once we are finished. And so it just is, again, Marcus is responding this time for segment 2 to Val's pre-written responses. So would you like to move forward, or would you?
Sure.
Sure. So for the question and answer segment, my first question will be, which are more direct questions, are how should Vice President Biden be responding? We know your feelings on President Trump. Should he be addressing this issue, and how so?
Okay, I'm trying to find where Val's response was to
So
this.
her response is just simply that maybe I think he will actually will soon. And how would you say, has he done it so far? Do you think he's done it so far, or should he be doing a better job? What would you say?
Okay. Well, okay. So firstly, in terms of what he's done so far, so he published an op-ed back in January, and I'll try to find it later if you'd like to post it.
Sure.
In which he said we should not trust the. This was way before when it was only in Wuhan, when it wasn't known if it was coming here. We suspected it would, and he specifically said we should not trust take the information that's coming from the Chinese government at face value. We need to have our intelligence community carefully evaluate it, and we should not assume we're getting accurate information. Back in late January. So that was one very important thing he did. Sometime in probably early March, and again, I'll find these. He posted another op-ed, which I believe might have been written with the help of co-written by Ronald Klain. Ronald Klain helped run the Ebola response under the successful Ebola response under President Obama, where I believe we had in the entire nation 2 fatalities, something that people feared would be far worse. And he laid out at a fairly high level. He's not the president right now. What his strategy would be, what his recommended strategy would be for dealing with this crisis. Now, has this gotten the same amount of coverage that I'd like it to, where people say, oh, Biden's really laid out strong alternatives? No, because the truth is, and this is back to the media, but the two they are related. They tend to obsess about Trump and everything he says and everything he does, and kind of consumes all the oxygen. So, I mean, at the end of the day, he's given numerous interviews. I mean,
So you're
Joe
not
Biden
believing his, you're
is limited by the circumstances of we're in the middle of a pandemic, and he does not want to catch this disease for obvious reasons. Particularly, he's not young, and he's going to be our nominee for president. Nobody wants him to catch it and be ill. So he's not doing in-person interviews. He's done numerous interviews. The idea that he hasn't is I've seen him on Good Morning America. I've seen him on cable news at night with Anderson Cooper, on MSNBC, on CNN, on all of them. He's talked about numerous topics, including the response, what we're doing wrong, what we should be doing better. So he is putting out the information he needs to put out. The fact that it's not getting as much attention as we'd like, that's unfortunate, and it's honestly, I don't know what more he can do about it.
So to
But in the
clarify,
end,
to clarify, you are saying that his response has been adequate. It's that the media has not portrayed it well, and that's your critique, not that.
well, I don't know if they haven't portrayed it well. They haven't given it nearly enough focus as it merits, considering he's going to be the Democratic nominee. What he's saying makes sense, and they're spending, 20. Let's just say they spend 23 hours and 9 minutes a day on all the garbage Trump throws out, contradictory nonsense like Obamagate, nonsense like God knows what he's going to say. I mean, this is his game. He throws tons of crap out there because if it's all about him, then it's not about anybody else. Now, I don't know if that's really going to serve him in good stead if things go badly, which they are.
Biden right now.
That's the way it is.
But no, and just to reiterate, I'm not pushing back here. But if anybody would like to comment afterwards or add comments to the blog on in response to if you disagree with Marcus and Val, you can have that opportunity as well. Feel free to as well.
Sure.
Are you prepared to move on to the next question, the final question of the day?
Sure.
So I would like to focus now on how state and local governments have responded. So how has the state and local government response and information been for you specifically? So Val, who lives in California, I'll read her response. California's government response is, so we have been testing for COVID locally now. I think that is a plus. I haven't attempted to get tested as of yet, but I am considering it. Our local government has been in line with the governor's mandate. About 1/3 of the population is wearing masks in stores, and the majority are maintaining social distance guidelines. We currently have about 100, and this was written a week ago, 170 confirmed cases, majority confirmed within the last couple of weeks, which is concerning, but I am hopeful. So how would you respond in regards to how New York is done? But more specifically, I'd like you to regard to how New York's information portrayal has been. And so like you can address either Latimer, who is our county executive, for example, or how Andrew Cuomo has been portrayed, and how do you feel? Have they been doing an adequate job presenting the information? Is there something they can be doing better, etc.?
Right. So we're just about New York, not about other state and local governments around the country.
No, I want you to focus on specifically New York. So these are the
Okay, sure.
questions.
Well, I don't live in New York City, but clearly, what happens in New York City has an effect on the broader region. People, we don't have walls around the city where people don't go from New York City to Westchester to Long Island and so forth. So, you know, in the early days when we were starting to see serious problems in places like Italy, when the magnitude of the stuff started becoming very well known, Bill de Blasio was communicating to New Yorkers against most of the advice of the people in his administration, and this has been covered extensively. Oh, we can be, protect the vulnerable, but it's not time to shut down life in New York. It's important that we continue to have a vibrant cultural environment. And he was posting recommended movies for people to go see and so forth. So both his communication and his policy, where he did not do anything to shut down the bars, restaurants, or whatever. And I know for a fact that that final weekend before they got shut down on Monday by the governor. That final weekend before that Monday, which was the weekend leading up to St. Patrick's Day, was a nice warm weekend, and every bar and restaurant up and down Manhattan was jammed. And that's a big part, in my opinion, and based on everything we know about how this thing gets spread, of why New York City had was the worst hotspot in the country. It probably still is today if you look at the stats, even though it's finally getting better. So his communication, as well as his policies, the two go hand in hand, were horrendous. If you asked me to name the worst leaders during this entire pandemic in the entire country, I would rate Trump as the worst leader, and I would probably put Bill de Blasio as second, which goes to show you I'm at least bipartisan in condemning people when I think they've screwed up. I think there's been much more problems with Republican leaders in this particular case, but nobody gets a pass because they're the party that I happen to prefer. Andy Cuomo, I believe, also waited a little too long to take more aggressive steps to shut things down in New York. And he was about a week behind when California did it and when Washington did it. And Washington had the first big outbreak, so it's understandable. But we had, in my opinion, we would have saved a lot of lives and done a lot better had we shut it down a week earlier. And I would bet a lot of money that Andy Cuomo would tell you the same thing if he were being honest. And I'll bet a lot of money that he spends nights tossing and turning and wishing he had done it a little bit differently. I think he's a good man. I think he cares deeply about the people, and I think he made a serious mistake there. Now, as far as communication, though, I do think that I've watched many of his daily press conferences. It's a model for how it should be done. He speaks from fact. He says the good. He says the bad. He says what we're doing. He says why. He speaks from the heart about how we're all in this together. He sends an inspirational message. And I think a lot of people have gained a lot more respect for him than they've had in the past based on how he's done that. And I do too. I just don't want to gloss over the fact that he didn't handle it well early in the beginning. And there's also some serious questions about some of the ways he handled nursing homes. And that all should be addressed. So nobody has been flawless. Other people did. I think Val's governor did an even better job. But he's done well since those initial mistakes. And as far as George Latimer, I think he's been fantastic, policy-wise, communication-wise. And we're not even I'm going to put aside from the fact that we know him personally, and I think he's one of the best people around, and I know his heart, and I know how much he cares. I'm not going to say that other leaders don't, but I think he's been a model, and we've made a lot of progress in Westchester after a difficult start, and also being in a difficult region, in a difficult metro region, with a lot going against us.
And I'll take off my neutral hat here and say I do agree that I do know County Executive Latimer also, and I second that he's done a very well, good job. But
Yeah, he said a really
moderator, sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we agree on that.
Hmm. But think that really is the first segment too. Those were the questions that I wanted to focus on today. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make? Otherwise, thank you so much for participating. And ideally, we will do one or two more segments on this topic, or we can close it up. And we will touch base after this.
I'm available if we want to go further at another time. I always enjoy doing these. I always appreciate you doing this,
Anytime.
Danielle.
I really appreciate it for both Val, and I do apologize that we're having to do this in sort of a mixed media format with written and video. But hey, we're making it work, and we will. I'll keep you updated as how we proceed. So far, I think this is a fascinating topic on communication and disinformation, especially as this crisis continues to unfold. I hope you are well, Marcus, and I hope Val, you can hear me. You're doing well, and anyone who is watching and watches later on is staying safe and healthy. Feel free to participate in any questions or comments, and thank you again for your time.
Everybody stay safe.
Stay
Take
safe.
care of yourselves.
All right, I'm logging off.
Take care.